Dan Wetzel, Yahoo Sports, College Football Inquirer podcast 3 times a week with Ross Dellinger, Pat Forty, and, of course, a pretty regular guest with us, and we're thrilled to always have him when he can join us on 365 Sports. Dan, not a lot of games, but my goodness, we saw the one in Ireland. Your thoughts about what Georgia Tech did, the win for that program, and also not the best start for a team that's been squawking.
No, I think there was a lot of enjoyment around the ACC at that result. Florida State, and to take it to Central Texas, they're sort of your Texas of the last few years, and everyone enjoys when Texas loses if you're the agitator in a league, trying to get out of a league, trying to cause instability in a league. Florida State is all that, and then to watch Georgia Tech beat them, I'm sure was a small measure of enjoyment for much of the ACC, and that's how it's going to be Florida State and Clemson are trying to sue the ACC or in litigation. They got a long way to go. I think that was not a great performance. I did really like what Georgia Tech did. Brent Key, offensive line coach, and just the whole culture of the place is offensive line. I think someone said they have 15 offensive linemen on their roster, or in their they just rotate them in. It is about blocking, brute force. Reminds me a little of those old Stanford teams under Harbaugh and David Shaw. Just physical, and they grind the clock down, shorten the game, and that's a huge win, and I think a huge statement and kind of a marketing opportunity for Georgia Tech. Everyone was watching, and they told everyone what they're about.
Dan, when it comes to what you saw from FSU, is this time to hit the alarm bells because they were just very average the other day?
I think, you got DJU as your QB. How good is he? He still seemed to be struggling throwing it downfield. It's one game. You're in Ireland. They almost won. So I think you go either way with that. Are we good enough at quarterback to win this league? It's a different playoff now. Last year, Florida State won every game and got left out. This year, they can lose this one and still win the ACC, and they could be the 3 seed. So it's a totally different field now. It's a totally different thing. So did they learn something, develop? What is the factor of playing that game in Ireland, or it's an opener? It's hard. These teams have so much transition. How do you create? What a team is playing like now might not be anything like what they're going to be in November or whatever. But certainly for this season, that's not the way you want to start if you're Florida State.
I think it's part of us having to rewire our brains on how all this is going to work, right, Dan? Of like that loss on Saturday, that wouldn't have been a death knell either, but we would have known they have absolutely no room for error. I still feel like that's probably pretty close to the case, but there is more of a there is the expanded playoff, and I know that when Kirk Herbstreit had his tweet that went mega viral because of the offseason, basically patting FSU on the head and saying, that's okay, you still have a spot in the playoff. That is going to be different, right? Watching teams lose early on and not just automatically placing them somewhere because there's going to be so much left to play out. Yeah,
you're not eliminated. That they are in 17th place right now in the ACC.
Right. Yeah.
So they got a little ways to go, but yeah, you're not eliminated. You really weren't before. Lots of teams lost early in the season, and you have time to come back. But the idea of the playoff, the way we used to crown a champ, it was always just like you'd have to be a totally dominant team for the entire season. Never have a week off it. And only a few teams really had that possibility. Now you can grow into a team. You can have a hiccup. You can get some different opportunities. And in some ways, even if you're not really going to win, is this Florida State team good enough to win a national title? Probably not, because they still make a playoff. Yeah, that would be a pretty exciting thing. But it makes the conference races matter. Now, the problem with this early season loss, Georgia Tech's a conference team. So that is one loss in the ACC. I don't know whether they can sustain 2 and still get to like the ACC championship game. That's probably it. So they're probably walking that tightrope anyway.
Dan Wetzel with us, the College Football Inquirer podcast, Yahoo Sports with Ross and also Pat Forty. How bad do you think the notice of allegations are? Really, Conor Stallions gets a lot of the attention. How deep do you think this might be for Michigan?
Well, based on the leaked document that came out and everything we're hearing, like, not, I guess it depends on your definition of deep. It's not going to be Jim Harbaugh knew. Does not seem to be like Sharon Moore, the current coach, knew, or anybody really knew. It was more Connor and maybe some of the staffers or some of the interns operating on their own. Now there was a bit where Sharon Moore deleted his text messages with Conor Stallions. That wasn't a good idea, but they were able to retrieve them. And there doesn't seem to be any charges against Sharon Moore concerning that, so there's probably nothing in the text messages. But, like, I think from the start of this, it's always been like, who knew? How high up does this go? And from the start, Michigan said didn't go high, and it doesn't appear the NCAA found otherwise. Now, whether those guys didn't know or didn't know because they didn't want to know, those might be two different questions, but you got to prove what you can prove. So I don't know what they do with this. Harbaugh's gone, a bunch, Minter's gone, their defense corps, a lot of their staff gone. Conor Stallions obviously will get a long show cause, multi-year show cause and all of that. But I don't know whether they, how do you punish? I don't know what the NCAA really can do to punish people anymore. It used to be, say, you take 10 scholarships away and that would really hurt a team. Now with NIL, I mean, if you're paying a guy $500,000 to be on your team, what do you think he cares about the $30,000 scholarship or $50,000? Like, he becomes a walk-on. I don't know what could really happen here. So are they going to vacate the championship? I'm guessing no. Would there be a future postseason ban? I'm guessing no. I don't. There'll be a big fine. We'll see when it all comes out. But you also have the Netflix doc on Conor Stallions tomorrow. So big week for Conor Stallions in Michigan. The story that continues on.
Well, and he got, we've seen all the emails between him and the high school that he thought he was working for and then wasn't.
Yep.
So all of that. Dan, it is, and this is very much, kind of the big business kind of thing that college football is, because you could see this, take this to a corporate level of some big company that had something similar and nefarious going on. Sharon Moore and Jim Harbaugh and the guys could have been like, man, this Stallions is a wonderkind. But no part of my brain tells me that they didn't go, look, I don't know what he's doing. I just have to not care and accept the results, because clearly it was helping them out in some way, and he had enough of an impact where people freaked out about it.
Yeah, and that's kind of been their thing. Like, well, look, he came from the Naval Academy. He's clearly very, very bright. He's a Marine captain. He's a guy that, just absolutely poured himself into this job and spends an enormous amounts of time, worked trying to figure out signals and decipher codes. And let's also be, this is football play codes. He's not figuring out like where the Russian nuclear submarines are. Like, this is not Wind Talkers. Like he said that, like, they hold up a sign with SpongeBob SquarePants and the Nike swoosh and
like Katy Perry.
Katy Perry, and you can figure it out pretty easily. So it's not that complicated, and so that's kind of their thing. But he was, and then the bit on Stallions would be, well, if I'm good at it, I'm not telling them that I might be cutting a corner, right? Because I'm getting attention and praise and potentially a promotion because I'm good at this. So, again, I don't know. It's up to each person to believe what's believable to them. But does not seem like the NCAA had any idea that Jim Harbaugh knew. And that was always the biggest fish, or pretty much anybody else. But we'll see. We'll still see what's in that notice of allegations and what the NCAA will do with Michigan. They're certainly not happy with Michigan. So they may still try to really drill them, and it'll be a process. But as you guys know, this takes, 90 days to respond and 60 days after that to respond to the response. And nothing's going to get settled until next off season at least.
Dan, we talked briefly about the UConn Big 12 story that started to emerge last week, and there was an update. The Big 12, I guess, had their presentation and no vote on UConn. I hate the timing of this. That's what I was saying earlier. I just like football starting, and here we are, and here's another realignment chapter potentially. So I don't love that, but I get it, I guess. Your thoughts on the Big 12 and UConn and any possible pursuit there, or does it make sense to you? Just where do you kind of see that storyline?
I don't like it. I mean, I just don't like it. I don't really like it for anybody. Would there be some good basketball games because UConn's playing some Big 12 teams? Sure. With the Big 12, but like it's one team. Like, how many times are they really in a league this big going to come and pay a visit? Mm-hmm. One every 3 or 4 years. But sure, would a UConn Baylor basketball game be great? Sure, but maybe we could just schedule that. Like,
yeah, right.
You don't have to you don't have to do all this stuff to get that done. But then you lose UConn Villanova, right? If you're just a fan, or you lose UConn whatever. To me, I don't know how much money this makes. I'm not really sure what the point is. It's a long way to have to travel. Again, you could set up some kind of scheduling deal with UConn and have them play some of your teams, but I hate it for UConn. Like, to me, this is a football decision. They're trying to save their football program and they got to find a conference, and they're risking what makes their basketball team great. That basketball team has won 6 national championships since 1999. It's the best program in the country. And all 6 of those were won when they were in the Big East, when they were in the American Athletic Conference, which has some great basketball, or had it, including Houston and stuff like that. They weren't that good. That program works when they're playing in the Northeast against other Northeast teams, and they've just won 2 straight national titles. It's exciting for those students. It's exciting for the state. It's exciting for the campus. Why risk that for a football program that isn't any good and no one really follows, or just to chase money? It's like money over. It's just all about money instead of winning national titles. Like, isn't that what you want your school to do? Isn't that, as a fan, what you would want? Not, hey, we got more revenue. Who cares? Like, I want to win. UConn wins big time. Mm-hmm. Last year's NCAA tournament wasn't really close. They pretty much blew everybody out. They have they got their coach to turn down the Los Angeles Lakers. Does he do that if he's in the Big 12 and it's a whole different? You're flying to Waco and Lubbock and Tucson and all over the place. I mean, it's just a whole different ballgame. I just hate seeing a school, and I'm sure there aren't a lot of UConn fans listening here, but I just hate seeing a school give up what makes them special to chase revenue and some pipe dream that something they're not good at will one day get okay. Like, I mean, how good could UConn football ever even get? Well, you put them in the SEC, how good would they get?
Even in 7 years, what's the 7 years of them joining the league, Dan, in 2031? Yeah. You're telling them, hey, please get good in 7 years so that this looks good. They've never done that before in their history. And how much of their fans, for all the adrenaline rush that might be a game against Kansas or Arizona or Baylor or Kansas State or somebody like that, Iowa State, I mean, are they going to care about playing TCU and Utah and all that, or are they going to get excited about playing St. John's? I mean, that's the thing that stinks about this. And I know that rivalries, and all that doesn't matter, but especially when it comes to basketball, I think the fans will probably speak out to that.
Yeah, it's like, well, wouldn't it be awesome if Kansas comes? Yeah, absolutely. But it's awesome when Villanova, like you said, Villanova comes. They have a great rivalry with Providence College, like an hour and a half from their campus, right? Kids in that area choose between those types of schools. And when you're an outlier in that, I don't think there's a whole lot of kids that sit around and go, I'm either going to go to UConn or I'm going to go to Baylor. It's probably not. They just don't really, there's no Venn diagram, or very small. Or the next guy, your neighbor, or the person I love Big East basketball because it is the last bastion of like that, just kind of pure neighborhood brawl. And it's the schools that say football doesn't matter. And UConn is that one outlet. You have Division I football. The rest of them just play FCS, and they're happy with their basketball programs. And they win and win. They're really good at them. Like, they have really good basketball in that league. And so, I don't know. I just think I can't imagine a whole lot better when you're on a college campus than when your team wins the national championship. And they win it a lot in men's basketball, and they win it a lot in women's basketball, and even still could win it again next year. They have a very good women's basketball team come back. Why risk that and to chase money to help a football program that, I mean, that their stadium's 35 miles from their campus. There's just so many things. So just as a fan of college sports, I don't like it.
Yeah, there's so many things that have changed it. And there's no way they bring an extra dollar. And nobody that's been a part of the original Big 12 that sacrificed some of the incoming revenue the last, 2 or 3 years, they're not doing this again if they're not going to get more money. And I don't know how in the world that Big 12 or UConn can try to position that. Dan, we discussed the Florida State game to open up the weekend. You have Clemson and Georgia, Notre Dame at A&M, and there's a couple other pretty good, intriguing games. Is there one this weekend that's on your radar?
Both of those, Florida-Miami is a game where, like, whoever loses is going to be really questioned. That A&M Notre Dame game, though, is terrific. Can Notre Dame handle the heat? How good is Notre Dame's defense? How good is A&M under Mike Elko? Like, what do we got? It's a whole new era for them. Obviously, Kyle Field's going to be absolutely rocking for that. That's going to be a big time game. Georgia Clemson is a great backyard national championship caliber battle, and that means a lot too. But I'm very much looking forward to the game in College Station.
Dan, before we let you go, I know you're busy, but how was the Olympics?
It was good. It was good. This woman Simone Biles from Texas, pretty good. Mm-hmm. Pretty good. Yeah, I don't know if you heard of her.
Yeah,
she's pretty.
Once or twice.
Nice little upstart story. Yeah.
No, I followed a lot of your stuff, and obviously it was got some big TV ratings, but I knew you had been there, and that was
it was good.
Yeah,
it was cool the way Paris used the whole city, like the beach volleyball in front of the Eiffel Tower and all the different things they did. So it was good, and I think people got really into the Olympics in a way they weren't in Tokyo and some of the more ones when everything was no fans and the pandemic and all that. So. People just really into it, and it was a fun Olympics. Great basketball too. Basketball's incredible now. It's not just the U.S. game. I watched the Australia-Serbia game. It was as good as anything. You watch these games, there's 5 NBA MVPs on the court at one time.
Yep.
Yeah,
and they're playing like an NCAA tournament level.
What was the most offbeat thing you decided to go to? Where you're like, I've never seen this before in competition form. Let me meander over there.
I've been to a lot of Olympics. I've been very lucky. So I've seen a lot of, I've been to fencing. I've been to badminton. I've been to table tennis. Probably just the one that I made sure I went to that I didn't write about was the beach volleyball in front of the Eiffel Tower. It might have been the greatest stadium ever built. It was only for 3 weeks, but it was just, at night, you're just sitting there I'm watching this incredible beach volleyball. Is awesome anyway, right? Mm-hmm. Chase Budinger was in the match I watched. He was the former Arizona basketball player and NBA player, and he went back to playing volleyball. He's always a great volleyball player, and he was in the match. And the stadium is full. I don't know what it's, maybe 10,000 people could fit in there, maybe more. Just this temporary stadium, and then you're just looking up at probably the most famous building on earth. And it's all lit up, and it's got these it's just this is incredible. This is just an incredible scene. So that might be the memory I had of just how cool it was to be in Paris at that. The idea that they just figured out how to incorporate as much. They did a lot of the equestrian, on the grounds, the Palace of Versailles. They're just showing off at this point. They just used everything they could, and the marathon started at a building that was it got built in 1367. Just the history there is just crazy. So that was probably the part about Paris that I thought was cool.
Had you been there before?
I've been to Paris before, yeah.
Okay. I didn't know if that was the first time, but as much as you've traveled around with the Olympics and other sports as well. All right, Dan, again, the podcast, the College Football Inquirer with you and Pat and Ross, is that 3 times a week? You drop it whenever there's something you need to get to, or is it like Monday, Wednesday, Friday? When is it?
We go Sunday. We'll tape after the game, so we'll tape Sunday and then Tuesday, Thursday. So, 3 times a week.
Okay, all right.
For whatever's going on.
Thanks for your time, man. Appreciate it. Dan Wetzel with us from the Yahoo Sports, and he and Ross Dellinger, Pat 40